friends, Heidi here from Rain Country. God is good all the time. Well, I just created this recipe for a quick relief for sore throats and coughing. This is especially good for if you're just having that persistent cough that's keeping you awake at night. And that is why I came up with this recipe. This recipe does have alcohol in it, and it's based on a couple of different ideas that I've had. Now, a lot of you have heard of the hot toddy, which is a combination of whiskey, typically, sometimes rum is used, lemon and honey, plus maybe some spices. But also on the concept that even for those of us who don't drink, alcohol can still have its place when it comes to medicinal uses. One thing that has always worked immediately for me, if I've had a persistent, especially one of those dry coughs that just would not quit and was keeping me awake at night, was to simply take just a tiny little bit of full strength whiskey and take the smallest sip I could and then let that slowly run down my throat. And that would immediately numb the throat as well as warm the area up, and then I would be able to sleep. And then I would keep just a tiny amount in a little glass next to the side of the bed if I woke up in the middle of the night and because I started coughing again, which sometimes happened, and always right away it helped. But a lot of times just that sip that I would take before I went to bed was plenty. That's it. And then I would be able to sleep through the night. And when I'm talking about sips, I'm talking probably about a half of a teaspoon, just a little bit. And then you have the hot toddy. A hot toddy is a hot drink. You drink it like a tea, and you do have the whiskey or the rum. And then the other common ingredients are honey and then lemon juice, or even just lemon slices, and sometimes spices are added. So with that whole idea in mind, I decided to create my own recipe based off of that and make it in a concentrated form where you can take it either straight like I normally would with the whiskey itself, but in this case you're going to get the lemon and some spices and some raw honey, or you can take that concentrated form, add some hot water to it, and then make it into a hot drink like that. So right here is my trial one that I made the other night, and I currently still have it infusing because this is the other concept. It's also about making an extract of sorts as well. So this is the one I started just kind of playing around with, just basing it off a few recipes I came across for the hot toddy, and then what I think is going to work best for the situation, for quickly being able to relieve a cough. Now, before I continue, I do also have a really great recipe that is totally alcohol free. That is my elderberry spice cough, cold, and flu remedy. That's kind of a good all-around one, and it's good for everyone unless they have allergies to any of the ingredients in there, and I'll link to that down below. That one also, though, especially when you're keeping it in the fridge and keeping it cold, is also very good at soothing sore throats, helping with coughs, but also helping to bring about fast recovery with colds and flus, or even preventing them if you're taking it as a preventative measure. This, what I'm doing right here, is not intended as a preventative measure so much as just for immediate relief. So I want to clear that up right there. But anyway, you can check out that recipe I'll be putting down below, and any other related recipes or information, such as the video list I did on natural antivirals and immune boosters. I'll put that down below, and a couple other recipe videos that I think you'll find helpful. So let's get started. What I'm planning on doing right now is making a whole pint. So basing it off my original idea, what we're looking at is for your whiskey or your rum, whichever it is you choose to use, there's got to be a high proof alcohol for it to really be effective in this way. So I'm going to give this to you first in parts. That way you can take this and tailor it accordingly. Starting with 3 up to 4 parts of your whiskey or rum. You may want a lower alcohol content, so 3 parts might be better for you, or going with the 4 parts, which is what I'm going to be doing today. And then 1 part of lemon juice, and then 1 part of honey. Now, and make sure that is raw honey. That's going to be very important. Now, you can also back off on the lemon juice. A lot of recipes I came across had a lower amount of lemon juice to honey. Some were the other way around. So what I did was I decided equal parts of the lemon juice and the raw honey would be good. And I do like the flavor, and I do think both are very beneficial in this. And I also believe keeping it as raw as possible is very important, which is another reason why I'm looking at making the concentrate, and then if you're wanting to drink it as a tea, adding the hot water to it. So now that I got you here, what I'm going to be doing is I'm wanting to make a whole pint. So I'm doing 4 parts of the whiskey, which means what I need is 1 1/3 cups. So there's 1 1/3 cups. So apparently a pint jar is when you fill it clear to the top. I didn't realize that until just now. So, and I did just double check my measurements to make sure I was using the right cup and everything. So anyway, 1 1/3 plus 1/3 plus another 1/3 should equal 2 cups. And I need room to work with here. So I'm putting this in a quart jar for now. So anyway, this is the lemon juice and the whiskey. And then to that, I'm going to add another 1/3 cup of the raw honey. And since this is a more of a creamy, rich honey like this, it might be a little more difficult to blend. But this is why I like adding it in my jar last rather than at the beginning, because it can be harder to get it up off the bottom of the jar. So again, raw honey is excellent for many things. I still keep the Manuka honey on hand for emergency purposes, but whenever I'm talking about medicinal recipes like this, I just use whatever good raw honey that I have on hand. And again, raw is going to be very important in this case. Now, if you want, you can very lightly warm this, but I try to avoid warming honey at all if I can. So you can just shake it up like this. It's going to take a while for the honey to fully dissolve in there. You can also use a blender, stir it up that way, or you can simply use a chopstick or any kind of long stirring device and just keep stirring it like so. And you're just going to have to keep doing that. It will take a while if you choose not to heat the honey, like I prefer not to. And just be patient with it. But if you warm it on a very low heat, don't let it get hot, just let it get warm. That should help still keep the honey raw, but also get it to dissolve better. I'm going to add about 5 slices or so of fresh ginger. Go ahead and pour that over that. And hopefully I'll have room to add more. And then I'm going to put in a Ceylon cinnamon stick. Regular cinnamon is fine too. I just prefer Ceylon. I prefer the flavor. And generally speaking, because we do use a lot of cinnamon, then I do always stick with Ceylon. And then I'd say about 5 or 6 cloves in there, maybe a couple more depending on how much you like that. So I've got the ginger and the cloves and the cinnamon stick in there. And then another option would be to add a single star anise in there. In fact, I think I'm going to go ahead and do that. I wasn't going to, but now I'm going to do that because I really like star anise in using in cold and flu remedies anyway. And then another option that's really good for the throat, because marshmallow is excellent for soothing the throat. You can throw in a couple chunks of dried marshmallow root if you want. I'm going to go ahead and leave it out of this particular one, but I do use it in that cough, cold, and flu remedy that I was mentioning with the elderberries and the spices. Next, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a tight-fitting lid on there. I'm going to go ahead and shake it up some more. So I plan on shaking it every so often. And then I'm just going to let it infuse. Now, I recommend allowing this to infuse for a while because you really want those spices to infuse into your liquid here to get more out of them. That will also add a nice flavor, but you're going to get a lot of good benefits from those spices. So at least let it sit for 24 hours, especially if you're not going to do it cold. And I would say on a counter, but you can leave this for several weeks. Remember, the whiskey itself and the honey are natural preservatives, so it's not going to spoil if you leave it at room temperature. But if you're concerned, yes, you can store it in the fridge. In fact, after I allow this to infuse for quite a while, I am then going to keep it in the fridge because just like with this elderberry spice syrup, having it cold on a sore throat is also very helpful. But I do want to let it infuse, so at least 24 hours, but I recommend leaving it longer if you can, up to 4 weeks. And then from that point, you can keep it in your fridge and you can keep the spices in there and let them keep infusing in the fridge. or you can then strain it out and then just store the liquid without the pieces in there. I like to leave the spices in as long as I possibly can. So now let's talk about dosages. So part of this is going to depend on how strong you made it as far as the alcohol goes. So I went with the stronger side by going with the 4 parts of the whiskey. You can even increase that to 5 parts if you want, but with each increase you do in that amount of alcohol in there, then the more you're going to want to decrease the amount you're using as a dosage, especially depending on who you're giving it to. So as I said with the whiskey straight, I found a 1/2 teaspoon was sufficient to help with a sore throat. It might even been less because I've never measured it out. I just pour about that much into a little shot glass, take a tiny sip out of that, and that little tiny bit that's not even a tablespoon in there. It might only be a teaspoon that I put in there to begin with, and that can last me all night long, or just that one little sip. So in this case, because it is somewhat watered down by the lemon juice and the honey, then you can increase that ratio up a little bit. So maybe even a full teaspoon. That is if you're taking it in the full strength form. Now, if you actually want to make it like your traditional hot toddy, you're looking at 1 part of the concentrate to 2 parts hot water. So heat the water up, get it nice and hot, then add the concentrate to that. Again, you're trying to prevent from heating this in particular, other than adding the hot water to it. That shouldn't harm the raw honey in that case. So I would say a good amount to sip on might be about 2 ounces of the concentrate mixed with 4 ounces of hot water. That's going to give you a total of 6 ounces. So I would recommend sipping that slowly. Remember, you can make half that much, but it just, again, is going to depend on who you are and how much you think you need. I personally think that if I was going to use it in that form, I would probably go 1 ounce tops of this mixture to 2 ounces of hot water. So I've got a total amount of 3 ounces altogether that I'd be sipping on. But for me, I doubt I'll be doing that. Most likely I'll be taking it by the teaspoon in its concentrated form like this. So anyway, that might be something you could try. Remember, you can make much smaller amounts of this to start with to see if it's even going to be beneficial to you at all. And one thing I could say about this is it does have a nicer flavor than just plain whiskey by itself. You know, having that honey and that lemon in there can be quite beneficial. Oh, and I was going to say one more thing. Instead, if you want, instead of using lemon juice, like I've got the Lakewood Organic Pure Lemon Juice here, you can also take some dried lemon slices. So if you get some organic lemons from somewhere, slice them up, dehydrate them, and then put them in there with your spices and have that be your lemon, and then have those be extracted along with the spices as you're letting it sit, and that could be very good. You could also use fresh lemon slices as well. Either one will work. Just like I did with the ginger, I used fresh. You can use dried, but fresh just has a much stronger flavor. Once you dry it, it doesn't have that same bite to it. So as much fresh ginger as you can use, the better. And I feel perfectly safe because of the alcohol and the honey content preserving that just like that. So if you do end up making this and you try it out, come back and share with us how you used it and did it work for you? What was the amount that you took? This is why even if you don't drink, I recommend learning how to make your own homemade wines and meads, and to even have things like whiskey, vodka, and so on hand, because there's quite a few medicinal uses for those, even if it's just using for disinfecting a wound. High proof alcohol is excellent for that. It'll hurt, but it will work. All right, well, don't forget to check out the other recipes I'll be linking to in the description box down below by clicking on either show more if you're on a computer, or if you're on a smart device, a little gray arrow over on this side, both of them located right below the screen. And I will open up the description box so you can find all the information that we put in there. And thanks for watching. Take care and God bless.